when there is fear, we grab onto anything that we can find. If we're hanging from a ledge, from a cliff, even if there's a snake, a venomous snake, the fear compels us to grab onto it, knowing full well that we will be bitten, which might very well be worse, far worse than letting go of it might result for us. Today's sutta is an interesting sutta because it will show us the 5 kinds of snakes, if you will, that practitioners get themselves involved with or grab onto. But before we embark on the sutta exploration, which comes to us, by the way, from the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses, something has to be said about our dismissal, our neglect to consider the rarity that we are experiencing right now. Any person considering themselves pragmatic, looking at the world, especially now, would say, come on, Bhante, what rarity are we talking about? There's so much hardship, there's so much evil, there's so much wrong, damaging, hurtful, harmful behavior that is going unpunished. There's so much lack in education, in understanding. There's so many vices, so many non-virtuous behavior, so much craziness and lies of, well, transforming what is beautiful into what is ugly, selling off something as virtuous when it is completely immoral, unethical, and non-virtuous. There's so many diseases, so many of this and that. So how can there be, what rarity are we talking about, Bhante? Well, a person who is so myopic in their thinking, in their vision of seeing things in front of them, even a rich person, incredibly, ridiculously rich person sitting on a mound of gold that belongs to them, will still not be able to see the gold, not even a single piece. That's how powerful the mind is. So, above all, we have to protect the mind from being pulled into looking at the world as something completely negative, our existence as negative. And instead, we need to look at the rarity of the fact that we are born at a time when there is still the teachings of a Buddha. This is extremely rare. We have to give it its due respect, its due consideration, at least from us. Because the moment we sell it off as being not that important, So what? The Buddha existed 2,600 years ago. So what? The Four Noble Truths. So what? We've already defeated ourselves. There's a purpose. So the fact that there was a Buddha documented in not so long ago, whose Dhamma and discipline is still available, we call it the sasana. The tradition is still available. The teachings are available. That is a huge rarity. Now, the second rarity is for us to acknowledge is to acknowledge the fact that we are born as a human being in a time period when everything is about AI, everything about the other than the human, other, transhuman, something other than what we have here with the six sense organs, with this body as a human being. This we cannot dismiss as something insignificant. No, this is huge. This is the second rarity the Buddha talks about. The fact that we are alive as a human being. The third extremely important rarity is to be born as a human during the time of the sasana's life, meaning the teachings are available, but importantly, very important, to live or to be in a body, a human body that functions. You're able to process, you're able to understand, you're able to learn and practice. There's many, many billions of human beings. Not many of us are healthy, especially when it comes to the mind. The emotional well-being is completely jarred, completely shaken, and on a daily basis. So to have these three rarities already says so much. The presence of the Dhamma, which means the Buddha was alive not long ago. 2,600 years is nothing compared to vastness of time. Second, the fact that we're alive as a human being at the time of the sasana, at the time of the teachings, still being available, intact, if we know where to go. And this happens to be one. The Pali Suttas, the discourses that we've been exploring together. Third, to have a human body that is healthy emotionally, mentally, to be able to process and practice and understand and grow, apply the Dhamma. Now, the Buddha also added a few other rarities to be able, this is in terms of seeking seclusion, like we talked about last time. But specifically, he was addressing bhikkhus, and he said, to be able to make the decision to go forth. That is extremely rare when you have the other previous rarities added to the mix. But to go forth is very important to know why you're going forth. Many people are going forth for the wrong reasons these days, without understanding why. The teachers, they go forth under, preceptors, etc. The Buddha says to find the preceptor, to find a teacher who is giving you the Dhamma proper, under whom you can train, that is even more rare as you're going forth. In the case of laity, you can say to go into seclusion, as we've spoken about last week, to retreat as you're applying the teachings in your life. What if the teachings that you've been given is wrong, misconstrued? People are people, you know. So to find the teaching from a proper teacher who's teaching you the Dhamma as you're going forth in a human body that is healthy at the time when the sasana is still alive is extremely rare. But then there's a sixth layer of rarity that needs to be added. And that is encapsulated in the beautiful interaction between the Buddha and Venerable Ananda when he came to Lord Buddha. And Lord Buddha saw how much of an influence that Venerable Sariputta, the chief disciple, was having upon Venerable Ananda, who was the Buddha's attendant for 25 years. And the Buddha inquired as to the companionship, what we call kalyana mitta in this path and discipline. That close, deeply spiritual friendship pertaining to Venerable Ananda's and Venerable Sariputta's, because Venerable Sariputta had become his teacher. Venerable Ananda said, "Oh, Bhante, having the right spiritual companion, spiritual teacher, is half of the spiritual life. That's how significant it is." But Lord Buddha corrected him immediately and he said, "No, no, 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 no. Don't say that, Ananda. Don't say that." Ananda was surprised. He wasn't expecting what was coming next from the Buddha. And he says, "Ananda, the rarity of having spiritual friendship in this Dhamma and discipline, true, genuine spiritual friendship, is all the entirety of the spiritual path, not 50%, not half of the percent, the holy life. No, it's the entirety of it. Because everything is dependent on it at times. You can easily be misled by wrong so-called friendships, spiritual friendships. That, he says, is truly rare. That's why it's the entirety of the holy life. So I wanted to recount this episode for the importance of the rarities as seen and described by the Buddha when we are in this body, able to come to the Dhamma at a time when the sasana is still alive, where the Buddha died not so long ago. The teachings are still available. We are able to process, understand, look deeply at the mind, at our experiences, to find the coherence between the Dhamma and our lives, and to find a way out in the presence of proper teachings, because how the Dhamma is being carried into our ears is very important, meaning who we're listening to, extremely important. That is what I mean here with the kalyana mitta. With whom is it your interaction? And that is what I wanted to use as a preamble for today's sutta, because it deals with, I said earlier, snakes, but we're not going to be talking about actual snakes, but something far worse than that. And those are wrong teachers. So the Buddha addresses here that issue. So the sutta, as I mentioned, is Kakudha Sutta, and we will see in a moment who Kakudha, why, we have this name of the sutta. And without saying much more than what I have already, so I would like us to just jump in. Again, it's from the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses from the Book of the Fives, Panchaka Nipata, and it's sutta number 5.100. So 100th sutta from the Book of the Fives, AN 5.100. Kakudha Sutta with the Deva Kakudha. So that's already says something about Kakudha. Let's begin. I have personally heard this. Once the Blessed One was staying at Gosita's monastery in the region of Kosambi. It was during that time that Kakudha, one of the Kolian's sons who had attended on the Venerable Mahamoggallana, had recently died and was now reborn among the Devas with mind-made bodies in the heavenly realms of forms. It's, well, let me say a few words about that. We have already discussed in the previous, some of the suttas about Manomaya in the Devas, the mind-made bodied Devas. They make the mind, through the use of the mind, the power of the mind, they take a shape. So it's from the Rupa Loka. They're now no longer in the sensual realms. So in the Dhamma, we have three breakdowns of existence, three realms, even though you've heard me mention in Buddhist cosmology, there's 31 realms. Okay, if you take those 31 classes of different beings, Devas have several classes within that 31. Humans, we have only one. Animals, one, etc. Petas, miserable ghosts, and then hell realms and asuras, etc. And then, so there's the first range, okay? That is the first breakdown. That is the sensual realm, meaning deals with the senses. Sensorial experiences are paramount in these realms, like the human body. We often talk about the six senses: touch, taste, smell, sight, all these things. And they very much are involved with the feeling of sensuality. So there's the pursuit of enjoying sensorial experiences, to experience sensual desires. So that falls within the category of the first breakdown, in which we find animals, in which we find obviously humans, we find the Devas and other some beings as well. But that's the first break, and as well as the Devas. So many, many classes of Devas fall in that sensual realm, such as the Tavatimsa heaven that you've heard or read about a lot in the suttas. There's a lot of, sensuality involved, but that is still within the bounds of being born in the breakdown, as I said, of the sensorial or sensual kama loka, we call it in Pali. Next, we have the rupa loka, which are the form realms. Okay, those are typically, we're getting closer to the Brahma realms. Okay, they're beyond the sensuality, the sensorial. There's no pursuit of sensual lust, for example. If you're a person who enjoys being passionate about things, you're not going to, and if you have enough merits, let's say, and you die with the right intentions, you will not be able to, or wrong intentions in this case, to be reborn into the area or breakdown of Rupa Loka, if you're still attached to sensuality. Okay? So, because that is the form realm. So this being, Kakudha, who was an attendant to Venerable Mahamoggallana, when he died and became a Deva within that realm. And then, in case you're wondering, then we have the Arupa Loka. Arupa means the formless realms. Okay? So, which is finer. And you can say Lord Buddha's own, with Siddhartha Gautama's own teachers, Larakalama and Uddakarama were reborn into formless realms. And all of which the Buddha instructs us specifically to avoid completely. That's why we do not seek rebirth into any of these realms, The goal of the holy life is not to be reborn in a heavenly realm, to come back again, whatever, however opulent, however divine, celestial it might sound like. All of these are traps. All of these are accessible and dominated by Mara. We have to acknowledge that. We have to understand that. The Dhamma is not about rebirth into any of these realms, no matter how comfortable or delightful they might seem. This is not the tradition for that, to be reborn somewhere like that. We seek bhava nirodha, the extinction of that process, the ending of that process, to seek rebirth, because rebirth is always transitory. You do not have a fixed eternal location for you. So you struggle and you suffer, you struggle and suffer. You're always caught in this wheel of samsara. And that is what we are seeking to cut ourselves loose from. That's what we mean by release, freedom. Okay? So here, we don't know the spiritual level of Kakudha. However, he is of that realm, which means a lot already. Means that they're pretty close to having broken all the 5 fetters, the Sangyojana. Not completely, because otherwise they would have been reborn into the pure abodes of Anagami. But that's still pretty high up in the ladder of celestial beings, because they are beyond sensuality. Because he was a bhikkhu or samanera. So anyhow, let's read some more. Now, as a youthful Deva, his physical size was bigger than 2 or 3 times the size of a Magadhan village, including their fields. But despite his enormous size, he did not impede on anyone or anything, including himself, as he moved about. This requires a few words of elaboration, because oftentimes we use whatever measures or yardsticks, reference points we have in our lives. In other words, our own worldview. So long as we are still human beings, we're going to function on these different dimensions, right? So we have X, Y, and Z. Those are the 3-dimensional forms or dimensional world that we know very well, we function in. We have time also, that's the 4th dimension. So that is very constricted, limited in scope and in measure compared to the other devas, the other realms. That's why to use, for example, a 3-dimensional device or instrument to measure what goes beyond the 3 dimensions is next to impossible. And that's why it's funny, because human beings seek to look with their own telescopes, multi-billion-dollar telescopes, into the stars, trying to find a Deva Loka. It's not going to be possible. Your instruments are wrong. They're very, very backwards, because our measuring system, our reference points are wrong. I say this because of this mentioning here about Kakudha, that it says his size was as big as 2 or 3 Magadhan villages. They're not small villages, by the way. And the sutta also mentions with all their territories, with all their fields. He was bigger than that. But some time ago, a student was asking me, when they were surprised to hear me say about the size differences between devas, and depending on which deva category you're talking about, and humans, we have to relinquish our own concept of measure, physics. If a person stepped into your world and they are 10 feet tall, that's going to very much shatter your image. It's going to, at the very least, shock you, because that's not normal. So there will be a giant, right? So this is beyond being a giant, okay? So many a times there are several kilometers or more, hundreds of kilometers, when using human measuring systems. For that reason, the devas have to, if they appear to a person, as in the case of the Buddha, they did not come with those features. It's just like you communicating, let's say you're traveling from Asia to Europe, and you're able to speak Hindi or Chinese or some other language. That's your native tongue. But if you land in Paris and you speak with locals, natives there who do not obviously speak the language, you have to find the language that they understand. Similarly, with physics, the measurements are shifted. We cannot do that as human beings interdimensionally as they can. And even there's a difference between the variations of levels between the devas too. Devas on the lower level cannot do all their, they don't understand many of the functions of the higher devas. So it's very relative. So please don't roll your eyes when you hear a term like the size of Kakudha Deva was several, times bigger than an average Magadhan village or villages. Don't dismiss it. That's what I mean. Simply because it doesn't fit your worldview. It's just that our worldview is very limited, very minuscule. So it doesn't mean that the Dhamma is wrong or that the Deva realms don't exist. We don't have the capacity to understand. That's one of the reasons why many of us don't know, don't believe, don't see, don't interact, don't witness the Devas in any way. And we just think that they don't exist. We just brush it off as non-existent. That is to our detriment. That doesn't do anything to the Devas. So please be mindful of that. Now, as a youthful Deva, his physical size was as a youthful Deva. That's what I meant by physical size. Physical, not in our case as us human physical, but Deva physical, meaning again, that's why I have to pause. Manomaya, it's mind made. Okay, the body that was relatable, visible to the Buddha or to Venerable Mahamoggallana, we're going to see. Anyhow, then the youthful Kakudha, now the son of Devas, went and approached the Venerable Mahamoggallana, and after paying homage to him, stood to one side and said to the Venerable Mahamoggallana, Bhante, this desire arose in Devadatta's heart. I will be the head of the Sangha of Bhikkhus. Also, Bhante, as soon as that desire arose in him, suddenly all his psychic powers left him and vanished. Then, having reported this matter, Kakudha, the son of Devas, paid his respects to the Venerable Mahamoggallana, and after circumambulating him, he disappeared. So he just came, reported the matter, because you cannot hide your intentions, especially when it comes to someone so evil as Devadatta, because this was the end of Devadatta's ambitious rope, in a sense, because he had tried so many things. And as we know about King Ajatasattu, he caused him to kill his own father, right? So this is when the intention came for him to head the Sangha. Of course, he did other things too. He broke the Sangha. He created the schism after he went to Lord Buddha and said that, Bhante, you're too old. It's time for you to retire. I want to take over. I'm the best person to take over the Sangha, as if it's like hierarchy. We don't have that. So anyhow, he reported this matter to Venerable Mahamoggallana directly. And when you go against the Dhamma, even if you've had certain abilities, if you go, again, I mentioned, if we go against the Dhamma, the teachings, the purity, because Dhamma also means truth. What is pure? What cannot be shaken? What cannot be changed or transformed? It is truth, whichever way you look at it. It might be covered, it might be blocked, but it doesn't change. But to go ahead and work against the Dhamma, that means you blocked yourself from the Dhamma. And the very fact that he was able to experience the jhanas was because of the Dhamma personified, meaning the Buddha teaching him the methods. But here he was going against his teacher, going against the Dhamma, in other words, by saying, you know what? His ambition was so strong. He was blinded by it. This is narcissism par excellence. Later, the Venerable Mahamoggallana went and approached the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, sat to one side and reported what Kakudha, now the son of Devas, had informed him earlier. And the Blessed One said, Moggallana, have you penetrated and seen the mind of Kakudha, the son of the Devas, with your own mind, to see whether his words were true and not otherwise? Bhante, I have indeed penetrated and seen the mind of Kakudha, the son of the Devas, and saw that his words were indeed true and not false. When we're talking about a powerful practitioner, pure being as Venerable Mahamoggallana, who was the second chief disciple, the Devas were always communicating. But as a practitioner, especially as a noble disciple, in his case, he was an aseka, he was beyond the training, so nevertheless, he was a noble disciple of Lord Buddha. You still have to check. Have you checked your sources? You know, we hear that a lot in the world today. In the world of academia, when you are researching something, you go after the primary sources, secondary, tertiary, etc. You have to check your data to prove to yourself and to anyone later on who might question it whether it was true or not. That's exactly what the Buddha is asking from Venerable Mahamoggallana. And Venerable Mahamoggallana had the ability to look into the hearts of beings, whether they're human or not. There is no difference. If a person is able to see the heart of another, be they human or non-human, if their hearts are pure, if they come from a good Dhammic place of understanding the truth, even the hearts of the Devas will become transparent to them. Their eyes will pierce into the heart of even Devas. They will see what's in there, their intentions. This is what this Dhamma delivers. So we don't take their word as absolute truth. You have to check even that. So Devas are not things that we go and worship in this sasana. Proper teachings of the Buddha, even though there's many, many places, many traditions in Buddhism that have turned it into Deva worship. That is not the teachings of the Buddha. Because here you have Kakudha, who was a Deva, who came, bowed to Venerable Mahamoggallana, reported the matter. Venerable Mahamoggallana checked it, saw that, yes, indeed, that is true. He's speaking the truth. And he just confirmed it to Lord Buddha that, yes, Bhante, I did check, and it was true. Then the Blessed One added, Moggallana, mark these words. Soon, that foolish man, Devadatta, will be exposing himself as he reveals through his behavior what was hidden all along in his heart. Moggallana, there are these 5 teachers to be found in the world. What 5? This is the reference I was making to the snakes. Here, Moggallana, A certain teacher who lives with impure behavior and without any virtue reflects to himself, I am such a virtuous teacher, possessing a character that is pure. Because I'm such a virtuous person in my behavior, undefiled and uncorrupted, faultless. That's what they're thinking to themselves. Meanwhile, his own students see him for who he truly is, knowing full well how their teacher behaves, which in fact is not virtuous at all, being one living with impure behavior and without any virtue. Those students, however, do not come forward, nor inform the lay people of the truth about their teacher. Instead, they reflect to themselves, how could we let the public know about him? Because if we do, he will get mad and upset with us. Besides, if the public knows this about our teacher, then how will he be getting his robes, alms food, dwelling, and medical attention whenever needed? His requisites. So the students continuously lie and cover up for the teacher in an effort to protect him, who in turn expects his students to keep silent about his impure and non-virtuous behavior. But nevertheless, the truth about a person cannot be hidden, for it is revealed through their actions. This is one way of understanding the meaning of that metaphor I use of a person hanging from a ledge. In fear, they will grab hold of even a very, very poisonous snake, which they know will kill them on the spot. But they're afraid. They're afraid as to what might happen, as the case here is with these students of this corrupt teacher. Because what if? There's fear. But fear of what? We have to ask. Remember in the Brahmajala Sutta, over a month or two ago, where we covered the first of the Digha Nikaya discourses, the long discourses. The Buddha was saying how all the 62 views, the wrong views, they all stem from feeling a certain way, ultimately. All those philosophical, metaphysical, all these nonsensical views that people have and hold on to, essentially, when you dig deep, follow the source, you will see that it comes from contact, from the way that contact registered. In other words, how they felt about a matter, about a situation, about a thing. How that theory then later on came was simply to augment and support that sustaining of that feeling, of that contact. And this is the same in many ways, where you have a group of human beings who are saying, no, our teacher is, yeah, I know, we know. He can be annoying. He can even do things that are questionable, but he's our teacher. Oh, we love him. But why? Why are you there? To establish a relationship? But you could do that with anybody on the street. Why this one? Oh, because there is fame by association. Because here, that statement, oh, how will our teacher get his 4 requisites? That also includes us, by the way. The students rubbing elbows with this famous teacher. All you have to do is look around in the world and you'll see several examples, maybe even in your community. Anyhow, again, Moggallana, a certain teacher who has an impure lifestyle while being supported through impure means reflects to himself, I am such a pure teacher, living an undefiled lifestyle and gaining a livelihood that is pure, as I live uncorrupted while being supported through pure means. Meanwhile, however, His own students see him for who he truly is, knowing full well how their teacher behaves, who is in fact not living a pure lifestyle at all, while being supported through impure means. But despite their full knowledge of this fact, they do not come forward, nor inform the lay people of the truth about their teacher, and instead they reflect to themselves. How could we let the public know about our teacher's wrong lifestyle, whereby he gains his livelihood through impure means? Because if we do say something about it, then he will get mad and upset with us. Besides, if the public knows this about our teacher, then how will he be gaining his robes, alms food, dwelling, and medical attention whenever needed? So the students continuously lie and cover up for the teacher in an effort to protect him, who in turn expects his students to keep silent about his defiled lifestyle and wrong livelihood, while being supported through impure means. But nevertheless, the truth about a person cannot be hidden, for it is revealed through their actions. You've heard me say a phrase that I heard from a fellow therapist several decades ago, in fact. When I first heard it, I said, that's it. It should be inscribed on every single doorway, in every language around the world. And that is this: trust the behavior, not the words. The words might be lies, and we live in a world that you have a lot of that. But the actions speak for themselves. You don't even have to speak to somehow represent the actions. You don't need to advertise the actions. But the actions are loud on their own. That is the behavior of the teacher. This is not something that was recently taught by the Buddha a few days ago, a few months ago. This was spoken to his chief disciple, Moggallana, almost 2,600 years ago. Because it means that these things were visible not just in the other traditions that the Buddha had seen, but also within the Sangha itself. Remember, the fear I was mentioning in the student or the person hanging from a ledge, that fear is about losing something, losing gain, losing influence, losing some type of affluence, or losing face. That's a big one. Becoming embarrassed. If I say this about my teacher, what will those people over there do or say, especially if they are the majority of the community and they don't belong to our faith, our practice, our tradition, our religion? I've seen this in Asia quite a lot. I've seen this also in Los Angeles, where there is an effort on behalf of the students to hide it. Something that is extremely questionable, if not full on against the Dhamma. It should cause the laity to throw that monk or nun out onto the streets, disrobe them completely, because they are completely not living the holy life. They're lying. But what do? We go hush hush, we don't say anything because, well, if we say something, that's going to make us look bad. And we're here just establishing, come on. That means you have placed something else higher than the Dhamma. Make no mistake about that. You yourself are now culprit to the adhammic behavior. Why? Because that teacher is going to know soon enough that their actions are pretty loud and clear, that they are not living the Dhammic life. They are lying, they're corrupt, they're vile, they're non-virtuous. But they look around and you have a group of sometimes countless people coming in, paying homage, paying respect, giving donations. They will see that you are part of that scheme. And this is how political systems function too. This is what's happening in the world. And that person becomes even more narcissistic because it's being fed by this love-hate relationship that has nothing to do with the Dhamma. But the laity thinks that they are actually practicing because they're showing this quasi-fake, completely fake, in fact, role. They go through the motions. But they look, you look at their behavior, you see there's a discrepancy. This is not Dhamma. This is what's killing the tradition today in the world, not just in the West, but in Asia as well. Especially in Asia, I would have to stress. Because there's the delusion that because we are born into this culture, that is in this case Buddhist, so we have a step ahead. We are ahead of the rest of the world that's just coming to the Dhamma. We are doing it right. Okay, that would be wonderful if there is the true position of understanding, and are we able to speak out? Because in addition to these five, the Buddha is going to give his example. That's the way of understanding, healthy way of doing comparing and contrasting as to what the role model should be. Next. Again, Moggallana, a certain teacher whose teaching of the Dhamma is impure, reflects to himself, I am such a teacher whose teaching of the Dhamma is pure, as I teach it in an undefiled and uncorrupted manner. Meanwhile, his own students see him for who he truly is, knowing full well that their teacher does not teach the Dhamma that is pure, and in fact, recognize how his teaching is corrupt and defiled. But they, nevertheless, do not come forward, nor inform the lay people of the truth about their teacher, and instead, they reflect to themselves, how could we let the public know about him? Because if we do, he will get mad and upset with us. Besides, if the public knows this about our teacher, then how will he be getting his robes, alms food, dwelling, and medical attention wherever needed? So the students continuously lie and cover up for the teacher in an effort to protect him, who in turn expects his students to keep silent about his teaching being impure, having nothing to do with the spirit of the Dhamma. But nevertheless, the truth about a person cannot be hidden, for it is revealed through their actions. You see this? The Buddha it's almost like a refrain. The Buddha is repeating it again and again. Unfortunately, many of the public, many of the laity, even the Sangha, we are in it for the wrong reasons. We pursue the Dhamma for the wrong reasons. Usually it's about fame, gain, reputation, honor, praise. Did I mention recognition? False sense of sagacity, or thinking that you're smart, using your teacher as an example because he or she is very well known in the world. They have many books. Meanwhile, if you go and probe a little bit, you see that the teacher was a drunkard. He used to get into car accidents. You have examples of that in the 70s, 80s, in teachers who came to the West, established entire schools, Buddhist schools. Meanwhile, they used to switch back and forth between lay clothing and robes. Some day you would see them in jeans. Another day you would see them back wearing the robes. Meanwhile, they're not doing this in an invisible fashion. They're doing it in full vision of everyone around them. Imagine the Buddha put on his royal sari, his royal robes. He took off his Bhikkhu robes. He put on his crown or started wearing his old jewelry, his old earrings, started growing his hair, his beard. Would you be able to even visualize that? But today we have teachers who go and have sexual relations with their students. They think about getting plastic surgery simply for aesthetic reasons because they can't control their appetite because there's so much food coming their way. They want to enhance second, third wing to their temples. Why? Why do you have millions and millions of dollars, pounds, euros, or whatever in your account? Why? Why do you need that? Why do you need to be on every TV station giving interviews? Why are you being seen by wealthy people, by presidents, by kings, etc.? These are questions that the laity has the right to ask. Also, when do they practice? That is an essential question to be asked. When do they seek seclusion? Do they seek seclusion? Remember, you cannot have the absence of seclusion when the person is truly a monastic, ordained. But unfortunately, in the world, just like in the case of the students who were mesmerized by Deva, because even when he broke the Sangha, many people went with him. Many bhikkhus, lay followers, because of his bombastic claims, his reputation, him making up stuff. Because people don't have the eyes to see the behavior. They don't have the patience. And they don't have Dhamma in their hearts, most often. But those who do will recognize the Buddha from a Devadatta. Again, Moggallana, a certain teacher whose explanations on the Dhamma are impure, reflects to himself, I am such a great teacher whose explanations on the Dhamma are pure and clear, as I always give answers that are undefiled, accurate, and uncorrupted. Remember, these are things that he's saying or she's saying to himself or herself. They have nothing to do with reality. This is the epitome of a narcissist. You see around the world today, the world is going down the drain because of some narcissists that have been given so much clout, so much room for them to maneuver. Nobody called them up to punish them, to expose them. So their narcissism gets to such ridiculous, grotesque levels that their actions become so much. It's like a cesspool that you cannot avoid its smell. But that's also reflective of the society that brought such a character out into the forefront to lead them. So it's not just the teacher who is to blame, but those people that keep him or her in that position. And no, you cannot hide behind, well, I have to keep the community together. I have to be loyal. There is this stupid, cancerous trait that people have. And I've seen this in Buddhist communities around the world, where for the sake of this false sense of loyalty, it's false. It's completely not Dhamma. It's wrong. It's evil, in fact. But on the surface, it looks so beautiful, as if I am maintaining the community together. Well, wait a minute. Your teacher, your chief, your abbot has done this. You know that. Yeah, but we don't talk about that. That was one time. Are you sure? One time is enough. But if there's been one time, there's been more times as well. How much are you willing to lie in the name of keeping the community together? To the point where it will come to, this is what I meant many times when people ask me, and I said, listen, if the Buddha was alive today, if he came to any of the temples around the world, Theravada at that even, he will be turned away. People will not recognize the Buddha. People will be abhorring the Buddha's words. We will push him away because he's going to expose our adhammic principles that we've adopted that have nothing to do with the path. That's why we have the suttas. That's why many people don't like these suttas that go, they're obsolete, they're completely ignored. Buddha continues, meanwhile, his own students see him for who he truly is, knowing full well that their teacher does not explain the Dhamma that is pure and clear, recognizing how his answers to questions are in fact defiled, inaccurate, and corrupt. And yet they do not come forward nor inform the lay people of the truth about their teacher. And instead they reflect to themselves, how could we let the public know about his explanations on the Dhamma to be wrong and impure? Many people, I've been present to situations where a certain elder, monk, this is when I was still a layman, was saying things that were not correct. So I was having a dilemma. I would look around and I would see people just mesmerized. They're drooling at the edges of their mouth, almost like, oh, this is so beautiful. And I'm like, there's no Dhamma here. Plus, what he said just now is contrary to there's no evidence of that. The Buddha never said that. At times, I would keep quiet because I would be sticking like a sore thumb. But then there came a point where I couldn't handle it anymore. I had to speak up because I said, who am I protecting? What am I afraid of? If I die right now, I will go to hell because I am choosing the path of adhamma. I'd rather be honest, even if I'm kicked out, even if I'm, scolded and brandished as a infidel almost, or a heretic, right? And in some circles, I became that. But I knew my heart was clear because I was going by what the Buddha taught, which this person is supposedly supposed to represent. We come across many other things that we read, either on blogs or in books, by people claiming to be knowing or discerning or to know the Dhamma. And you look and you're like, wow, so many people are following this individual. They consider him or her an arahant. But this person is leading so many people down the wrong path. Ultimately, it is your path. But when you're in a position to see it, you have to speak up. This permission is given to us by the Buddha right here. At the very least, don't go and subscribe to that following or cover up anymore for adhammic behavior on behalf of people who are supposed to be leaders in a community, leaders of a temple, teachers, because that's exactly what Devadatta was doing. And conversely, by the way, piggybacking off of what I said about the Buddha, if he were here today, he would be shunned and kicked out of the temples. Devadatta would find a very cozy, welcoming home in most every single one of those temples. That's what we have today. He would be very comfortable. He would be very warmly welcomed with open arms. Because most people are not living according to the Dhamma. Their actions speak. Don't listen to their words. But nevertheless, the truth about a person cannot be hidden, the Buddha says, for it is revealed through their actions. Again, Moggallana, a certain so-called teacher whose experience of what he thinks is true, understanding, and vision of the heart's release is, in fact, not based on reality, hence is impure. Then he reflects to himself, I am one whose direct understanding and vision of the heart's release is pure, undefiled, and uncorrupted. Meanwhile, his own students see him for who he truly is, knowing full well that their teachers' claim to direct understanding and vision of the heart's release is impure, recognizing that it is utterly a defiled statement and therefore corrupt. But they do not come forward, nor inform the lay people of the truth about their teacher, and instead they reflect to themselves, how could we let the public know about him? Because if we do, he will get mad and upset with us. Besides, if the public knows this about our teacher, then how will he be getting his robes, alms food, dwelling, and medical attention whenever needed? So the students continuously lie and cover up for the teacher, who in turn expects his students to keep silent about his impure lifestyle, while being supported through impure means. But, nevertheless, the truth about a person cannot be hidden, for it is revealed through their actions. These, then, Moggallana, are the 5 kinds of teachers living in the world. However, Moggallana, as for me, now the Buddha is turning the gaze to himself, because I possess pure behavior and live with virtue, I declare, my virtuous behavior is pure, undefiled, and uncorrupted. My disciples, therefore, do not cover up for me, nor do I expect them to, as there is nothing to hide about my behavior, which is always pure. This is why Lord Buddha would say, the pure, virtuous bhikkhu speaks, does, behaves in public the way he does in private. He behaves in private the way he does in public. That's courage. That's living truthfully. In other suttas, the Buddha says, similarly, the Buddha or the teacher, the true Dhamma teacher, does not change the teaching to deliver this way here, this way over there, to, according to the palate, according to the acceptance, according to what they like to hear, changing the Dhamma to fit their worldview so that he still gets credit, he still gets attention, recognition, fame, and money. He says, no, the virtuous Dhamma teacher, the true Dhamma teacher, doesn't do that. He doesn't morph, he doesn't change the Dhamma to fit the ears of its listeners so that they all like him. This is another example of a corrupt person, which we again see in today's leaders. They say one thing here, they walk away over there, they're talking about something totally different. If you remember from the Brahmajala Sutta, Lord Buddha also mentioned about those eel-wrigglers who flip-flop here and there. That's what we have today. So you cannot be a true practitioner at home, even if you're really, really diligently practicing the 5 precepts, your meditation, etc., you're reading the suttas. You cannot be truly, virtuously living and practicing the Dhamma when you leave your house, you go to the temple and you behave opposite of that. You speak things that, if the Buddha was there, you cannot possibly have done that. What is that? Are you then really living in public the way you really live in private, and vice versa? There's a imbalance. There's a fake reality, quasi. It's not real at all. It's lies. That's why many people do not advance anymore as they want, because of this dichotomy that they've created for themselves. But the Dhamma is simple when you look at it. That's why I said it's because of fear that we reach over and grab hold of that venomous snake, because we want to have this and that. There's humility needed to truly do what the Dhamma asks us of doing. It doesn't take much to live virtuously and then allow that to permeate, to spread outward to the world around you when you're in public. But that means you're going to have to say no to certain friends, to certain surroundings. People, I like them, Bhante. Yeah, but they lie, they cheat, they drink. I mean, but they're nice people. We grew up together. I mean, isn't it enough that I'm practicing my sila? Who are you kidding? Above all, ourselves, sadly. That's why there's no progress. There cannot be any progress. It's impossible. You're fooling yourself. That's what many of us do. So the Buddha says, I don't cover up for myself, nor do my students, nor do I ask them to. I don't coerce my students to go ahead and present a different image from what I truly am. In the Brahmaya Sutta, in the Majjhima Nikaya, we have a old, very old, centenarian, over 100 years old, Brahmin, who hears about the Buddha, but he lives so far. He says to his very high, his apprentice, high-level student, a young kid, young, less than 20 years old, go and follow him, record his behaviors, the Buddha's, his mannerisms, because I need to know if it is really the Buddha that is alive, that has come, the Tathagata, because I hear that he has the 32 marks of a great man, Sappurisa. And the student says, yes, Bhante. And he travels and he goes and he says to the Buddha, I would like to, I've been sent by my teacher. And they allow him to observe the Buddha. The Buddha did not behave differently when that kid was around, that Brahmin young boy was around. Meanwhile, he was registered, he was recording this. And because of his recording, his note-taking, if you will, we have so many other factors that we could not have had about the Buddha's daily behaviors. How he moved in space and time, how he turned his gaze when someone spoke, how he walked, how he entered or left a room. And they were impeccable all the time. Even when he got up at night to go to the restroom, to relieve himself. One time, Venerable Rahula, because of a visit from other monks, senior monks who had come to the temple, the monastery where the Buddha was staying at, and Rahula was there too. They had come, and because he was still a young Samanera, they had been given, those other visiting monks, some of them were Mahatheras and Theras and Bhikkhus, they were allowed to occupy or take, because they're visiting, to take the rooms. And Rahula, even though he was the son of the Buddha, to follow protocol, he had given up his room to these elders, and he had come and put himself in a fetal position, sleeping right outside the Buddha's door, right in between the latrine or the bathroom and the outhouse. And the Buddha gets up in the middle of the night. He has to go to the bathroom. I think he was even sleeping in the latrine or something. Rahul, I forget some of the details, but essentially this. Lord Buddha knocked on his own outhouse. In a sense, he actually coughed. The records say cleared his throat in case somebody was there. He didn't barge in. He didn't barge out of his room, his kuti. Look at the elegance. Look at the beauty. And Venerable Rahula, being his son, he coughs, clears up his throat back. He goes from inside. And the Buddha asks, who is there? And he says, Rahula says, Bhante, it's me, Rahula, your son. And then the doors open and he says, why are you here? He says, Bhante, because of the other bhikkhus came, I gave him my room, and because it's part of the rules, Vinaya, so I'm here. That image, just take it in. Middle of the night, darkness, quiet, and you're the king of the Dhamma. Because of you, the monks are there. These people are there in robes. Because of you, there's a monastery that was donated. Because of you. You don't think of yourself as, well, I'm the ruler here. Everybody has to, I can barge, I can do. No. It's the opposite. You don't become a gorilla like I've seen some people become because of the attention given to them by their students. You're in robes. You've walked away. You've gone forth. What for? Remember the rarity I said? To go forth for the right reasons. That's why I mentioned it. Many people are going forth for the wrong reasons, unfortunately. But to stay in public the way you are in private, that takes a special quality, which Lord Buddha is advocating for, praising by using his example. Second, it is because I have a pure lifestyle where I gain my livelihood that is pure, that I declare my life is pure, while being supported through undefiled and uncorrupted means. Therefore, my disciples do not cover up for me, nor do I expect them to, as there is nothing to hide about my lifestyle or livelihood with which this body is sustained, that always remains pure. You don't become a panhandler. You don't try to go and promise things to people so that they give you support. That's why, remember, even though I had some individuals, monks, who canceled out the right lifestyle from the Attangika Magga, the Noble Eightfold Path, as saying that this was incorrect. Right livelihood should not apply to a monk. It's actually number one. The monks are number one to be, should be applied to. Why? Because the food that I receive, the Buddha says, the clothing, the robes, the requisites that we receive as bhikkhus, what is that? That is our livelihood. You had individuals at one time when there was a famine in India who went and told villagers that they had attained to states of nobility so that the people could be influenced by that. False, by the way, statement. They started telling, oh, my teacher, oh, my friend over here, this fellow bhikkhu over here, sitting over there in the corner, he's an anagami. If you give them food, you're going to be set for countless lifetimes. Oh, by the way, my teacher is an arahant. So in the middle of the famine, these bhikkhus went brandishing, they advertised themselves. promoted themselves as individuals that were superior for the sake of gaining a certain livelihood. In this case, piece of bread or rice. The food that these villagers didn't have, they were starving, literally. So people took away the food from their own children's bowls and put them in the bowls of these monks, thinking that they were truly noble. They starved themselves. That's what we have today in these people who go ahead and collect so much money. I was stunned when I was in Thailand. I heard about this. I couldn't believe it. It's, I've been known to, be blunt. I'm not going to make an exception here. Thich Nhat Hanh's tradition, in France, the monastery, they had collected, I didn't know this, $25 million, which they later on donated to Harvard University. My jaw dropped. First of all, I didn't believe that. Plum Village, that's the name of it. How is that possible? I said, it's $25 million. First of all, how did they come about that? That means it was donated. That's beautiful. That means people donated. They gave money. For what? Even though I have many disagreements with his traditions, his teachings, etc. But still, it was still under the auspices of the Dhamma, his version, etc. Fine. But people gave. That was beautiful dana. Couldn't the Buddhist world benefit? People, just forget about the Buddhist world. People, hungry people. Why give it to Harvard University? Out of all places, one of the most corrupt places on the planet. Many people say it's a money laundering operation. So much, they don't need the money, for sure. And why does a Buddhist institution give it away to that for the sake of research into mindfulness, as if we haven't done enough research on mindfulness? Do you see the corruption? This is what we're dealing with. You have Buddhist, very famous monks. For 30, 40, 50, 60 years, they've been getting money from secret agencies of the United States. Why? Why do that? And that means conflict of interest. That means your livelihood is corrupt. We have to be able to call it out. This is, by the way, factual. This is all there. This is all, I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw it. Then it becomes a political thing. That means you are now no longer representing the Dhamma, my friend. The people who are donating money, they take away from their own meals, especially now with their scarcity in the world. People are starving. People are suffering. But they believe the robes, whatever kind of robes. What is that? The Buddha is saying your livelihood has to be pure. Bodhiraja Kumara Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, we have Prince Bodhi. He was the crown prince. He had a plan. He and his wife were not able to conceive a child. So what he did was he laid out the stairs all the way to the court in white, special cotton, linen, whatever, white material. And he made a wish with his wife. He said, if the Buddha steps on this white cloth, then that means my wife and I will have a child. If he doesn't, then it means it won't happen. Lord Buddha is invited along with the Sangha. He comes in right at the footsteps of this palace. He doesn't step on it, the Buddha. Prince Bodhi says, oh, Bhante, please, please. He doesn't tell. He doesn't say the purpose of it. The Buddha doesn't budge. He asks again and a third time, and then Lord Buddha turns to Ananda, doesn't say a word. And Ananda asks the prince, please remove. He knew if the Buddha did not step on it, there must be a very strong, valid reason for him not to. They step into the court, they sit for the lunch dana, and Lord Buddha asks Prince Bodhiraja, and he says, Prince, what was your intention in laying out that white cloth? And he says, Bhante, you have to forgive me. We don't have a child, and that was our hope. That was our dream. That was our goal. That was the primary intention. Do you see? Even the thought that was not spoken by this lay person was registered, was seen, was detected by Lord Buddha as being incoherent with the spirit of the Dhamma. That's why he refused. Even in his refusal, he was practicing right livelihood. How many monks can do that today? I challenge them. Everybody's bending over backwards to get more followers, to get more donations. Why? What if in the middle of taking or collecting that donation, I croak and die? Where do you think I'm going to end up? There's no consideration of these facts. This is not child's play. This is serious business, serious work. And it is dealing with the rarity that I spoke about earlier, the 6 rarities I spoke about that we are enjoying, we have access to. Especially as monastics, we have this such privileged, honorable position. But it doesn't come just like that. It has to be lived with our behavior that has to match every aspect of the spirit of the Dhamma, period. And the laity has every right to call us on it. And to also follow it, to follow exactly the words of the Buddha, as taught by the proper teachers, whenever you find them. And they're becoming rarer and rarer indeed. Furthermore, because my teaching of the Dhamma is pure, I declare my teaching of the Dhamma is pure, as I teach it in an undefiled and uncorrupted manner. Hence, my disciples do not cover up for me, nor do I expect them to, as there is nothing to hide about my teaching of the Dhamma that is always pure. The way we speak the Dhamma, the way we express, there's a certain, you can't speak with just any regular way. You can't tell jokes to make your Dhamma talk more entertaining. We are not performers. I was mentioning to a student not long ago. Because to do that, it means you are, playing for the crowd. There's no such thing in the Dhamma proper. That means whatever supposed Dhamma that comes out of your mouth is impure. It's defiled. It's corrupt. So we use the example of the Buddha. Always we reference, we go back, and that's what we're seeing the Buddha doing for us. He's giving us a reminder as to how we are supposed to live and practice and teach. And because, number 4, my explanations of the Dhamma are pure, I declare, my explanations of the Dhamma are pure, undefiled, and uncorrupted. Hence, my disciples do not cover up for me, nor do I expect them to, as there is nothing to hide about my explanations of the Dhamma that are always pure. You don't make up your own explanations to fit your own understanding, to squeeze it in. Well, what if your understanding is incorrect? That's why we have to go and check the sources to really validate if my understanding is correct. If it is not, then I have to drop it because it's not Dhamma. It's wrong. It's not true. It's false. But to go ahead and add explanations to justify my own understanding, irrespective of the Dhamma, that is what Deva was doing. That is what many teachers are doing today. sadly. That's why we have to go back to the source here. What the Buddha said, not what I'm saying, not what Bhante Candana is saying. Go to the source. Number 5, and because my experience of direct understanding and vision of the heart's release is, in fact, pure, I declare, I am one whose direct understanding and vision of the heart's release is pure, undefiled, and uncorrupted. Hence, my disciples do not cover up for me, nor do I expect them to, as there is nothing to hide about my direct understanding and vision of the heart's release, which is always pure indeed. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. The Anguttara Nikaya, of which this discourse is part of, is so full of explanations and down to earth, easily accessible, clear as day types of explanations straight from the Buddha's mouth that challenge our own lifestyle and our perception and understanding and conclusions about the Dhamma, and especially what we see around us, as advocated as Dhamma, Dhammic life, monks, nuns, etc. And if you're interested in, what would happen in the future, what will be happening, again, the Anguttara Nikaya is so full of discourses, clear, that really can shake you with its bluntness. And that's where I'm encouraged why I'm encouraged to share it with you, these suttas, these discourses. And that's what I'm also working on to make. I'm proofreading the 11 books now of the Anguttara Nikaya before it becomes public. Once they are, I'll post them on the website so everybody can have those thousands of suttas in the 11 books, so that you can really have it. Even though it's recorded, you can also listen to them. But it's different feeling, as you know, when you're reading and you take your time, you underline, even though they will be the PDFs. We don't have the funding for books now. But anyhow, it's a powerful reminder, a wake-up call by the Buddha that I wanted to share with you, because we're living in a world where it's becoming normal to adopt this narcissistic view of ourselves, where everybody's an expert, undeservedly, by the way, because it's so easy for people to gain recognition. And that is fooling the person to think that, wow, if I have that many people who are nodding and saying, yeah, then I must be it. Look at the world leaders, you see it. They're just a bunch of idiots, non-virtuous criminals, in fact, many of them, that are crushing and brutalizing human beings. Human beings. Meanwhile, they will not allow you to even touch a hair of their own loved ones. What is that? That's completely unhealthy. That's disgusting. That's ugly. The Dhamma is here for us to apply so that we can release ourselves from extra suffering. Extra because physically yes, that's a suffering that we cannot avoid, the Buddha says. There's physical pain, suffering, and there's mental suffering or emotional. That is what the Dhamma is directly helping us get rid of, and to reduce as much as possible of the physical one by the utilization, by the employment of discernment, of wisdom. It's very matter of fact, the Dhamma. It's very pragmatic. So let's not change the rules between one person or another. Rules, in this case, I'm referring to the Dhamma. Let's not change the yardstick of the Dhamma. That has to be intact. Don't close an eye, the Buddha is saying. If you see something that doesn't agree with the example of the Buddha, call it out. At least walk away from it and explain to others as to why you're doing so. Otherwise, we are in cahoots. We are holding the hands of Devadatta. We are partners with Devadatta because we are helping to strangle the Dhamma, the teachings in this time period. We are the custodians of the Dhamma in the way we live it and practice it. You don't have to be a monk or a nun to be able to call yourself a custodian of the Dhamma, if there's ever been such a thing. Every one of us, through our practice of Sila, Samadhi, Panya, are the real, genuine custodians of the Dhamma. Plus, Lord Buddha, before he even met a single bhikkhu, there were those two brothers who legends say they were from Burma, Myanmar. Merchants passing by. They enjoyed the Dhamma discourse from the Buddha. They were the first upasakas. So please do not minimize your role as lay people. Ultimately, it rests upon your shoulders, simply because of the numbers, the purity of your practice. So you have every right to protect the Dhamma. Every right, through your practice, through your own adherence to the principles and the spirit of the Dhamma. So I will stop here and see if there are any questions, comments.
Bhante. Just two observations. When you say call it out, I always get this two definite questions, answers. The first thing is that people are fear for exposing because they also fear of creating bad karmas for themselves. And second thing, this is always the answer from all people. Time has changed. We live in modern times. Those are ancient times. It does not apply to modern times. So I always get this too. And I know that it is not right. Yes.
And the second point?
The second point that is so one, time has changed. Yeah, and this is the yes, this is the answer with
Dhamma.
Yeah, and karma. Okay. They're afraid of exposing bad behaviors of other teachers because the practitioners or the students are afraid of creating bad karma for themselves. Yes.
Remember the fear I said? Fear is such a terrible thing. I once heard someone say that the most wealthiest piece of real estate, they asked where is it, where people said Hong Kong, people said this place, New York City, Manhattan, and he said no, visit a cemetery, any cemetery, he said. That's the most wealthiest, most expensive, most rich, valuable real estate. And people were stunned, like, what do you mean? He said, all the dreams that never were achieved, never pursued by countless people end up in the cemetery. When we do not speak out, life doesn't happen. It takes action. It takes decision-making power, especially when it comes to really truthfully living a life of substance, And Dhamma or Dhammic life is living life with substance, because it doesn't bring any harm to any being. It brings life. So when you are saying, I am practicing, let's say, musavada, or in this case, not speaking falsehood, or remember, many people want to keep the peace. That's another delusion, right? What they're doing is they are chickening out. That's another, slang, people say, oh, you chickening out. You're going basically to bury your dream in the cemetery. That's what it is. When you die, it's never achieved. You're going to say, I wish I said. I wish never did anything, though. That saying, that spirit, or that feeling never did anything, never achieved anything. Siddhartha Gautama could have stayed there, was surrounded by his 500 courtesans plus his wife. Rahula could have become the crown prince and maybe pass on the crown to him. An old man, and he would have died. And before he died, he would have said, yeah, it was a lovely, lovely, lofty idea to have found a way out for beings out of samsara, to free themselves from suffering, from dukkha. Yeah, I think that was a lovely thought. Yeah. Yeah, too bad I couldn't do it. What would you say to that? Even Siddhartha Gautama had to stand up. We do not give him enough credit sometimes. This young crown prince who had everything, looks, health, wealth, prestige, status. And on top of that, you had a bunch of astrologers coming in when you're still not even a toddler, making these prophecies about you that you're going to be set. You're going to be a Chakravartin. You're going to be a wheel-turning monarch, basically. You're going to be king of the kings. That's already a lot of pressure. Plus, you have a father, you have a family, you have all these people, plus you have a wife who loves you, and now you have a baby. Would you call that pressure? Yeah, that's pressure, all right. Is that pressure equal to, less than, or more than what it would feel like you experiencing when you're standing in the middle of a crowd and this person, in this case a monk, is living inappropriately, to say the least? Is that pressure that you feel like, it's an embarrassment, and it's being ostracized, it's being expelled? This goes beyond Dhamma, this goes beyond, or the teachings of the Buddha, I mean. This goes into deep primal fears that we all have, and that is to be expelled from the tribe. This is very old. This is like primal brain, primate brain, which is above the reptilian brain, where you're feeling, what would happen to me if my community, if the people I love or appreciate, or what will they say about me? That fear usually is underneath all of these, the sense of hesitancy to say out loud what everybody knows, by the way. Everybody has seen, but everybody does this. Today, President Trump, he's dragging thousands of people to their death, as well as the whole planet down the drain. Civilization as such is in jeopardy. Nobody's standing up and saying, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? Stop. Nobody around him. Nobody's saying that. This is a perfect example. Whether you're standing there in the middle of a temple with a few people or hundreds of people around you, or whether you're sitting there in the Oval Office getting all this prestige, being hobnobbing and sitting rubbing elbows with the President of the United States, or it could be Israel, it could be any other country that's criminal. But you know something is wrong. It's the same thing. The person over there in a position of power is saying, well, if I say I'm going to lose all my chances of success afterwards, I'm going to lose my prestige, I'm going to lose my membership to the golf clubs, I'm going to lose my private jet, I'm going to lose this. Or so and so is not going to be my friends in the temple, for example. People are not going to think good of me. But this is completely missing the key point that's happening in your heart that knows it all. Your heart is the one that will experience Nibbana, by the way. But what do? We silence it with all this nonsense. With all this nonsense. We camouflage it, we veil it with upakilesha. The Buddha says, the heart is brilliant, brilliant. But it's covered by all these upakilesha, with all these defiling attitudes and position taking. Why? Because we place the Dhamma over there on the ground, and we place my relationship with this person, that person in the community over there, high. And then the next step here, we have to justify that fear. We call that, oh, it's going to be bad karma. That's a complete lie. If anything, you're actually, by not saying it, you will get a bad karma. Guaranteed, by the way. Because you will die with the guilt. Before you die, right at that moment, the guilt will come up. I wish I would have said something. That is going to take you to very bad places. That, I guarantee it. I guarantee it. It's in the suttas. That's why I'm guaranteeing it. So these are all other things we come to add to the feeling, in this case, of I don't want to be shunned by society. And then the other factor comes in, well, it's embarrassing. What will they think of my family, my fathers, my forefathers? My family has been supportive of this temple for generations. What are they going to think of me? Again, who has become your priority? The Buddha, the Dhamma, the true Sangha? No. This fictitious blob of people that are not practicing the Dhamma and your interaction with them. That's why people, when they go to church, to temple, to this place and that, they are going there for that human relationship, social interaction, no Dhamma. That's why rites and rituals, the significance given to that drops, doesn't exist anymore for anybody who attains to the first level of awakening, Sotapatti. This is something that the average person cannot understand. Everybody's looking for that companionship and connection. That's another fear that people have, to speak out, even though what they're seeing is completely wrong. Have you ever seen Lord Buddha in the suttas, when a prince comes with their fancy, jeweled, bedecked chariot, and they had some very nice chariots, like the Lichavi princess, for example, or the king Pasenadi, or King Bimbisara, or even one of the elephants, if they're riding him in. Yeah, have you ever seen any discourse anywhere where the Buddha gets out and starts bless them with water and say, yes, may this elephant be your new ride, be blessed, like I have seen many times in Asia people doing? I was like, what is that doing? What is that abbot doing? What is, I couldn't understand. The person has brought their new car, their new SUV, their new sports car, right after they've bought it. And they know, you know, that they're coming, in a sense, they want protection, right? It's the different kind of insurance policy. But the fault is not with the laity, ultimately, I think. It's with the monk, who has convinced them that this is a higher source of insurance, which usually includes some good financial donation, which comes in a nice little red or white envelope. This is wrong livelihood. This should stop completely, because this is completely going against the Dhamma. Because that means the Bhikkhu is saying, this is my price. Come to me. You don't see the Buddha doing such things. As far as the other point that you said, oh, these are the, times have changed, right? The other cause that people say, oh, what can we do? It's different. No, that's incorrect. Because remember, where do we get these statements from? Today's sutta was from the mouth of the Buddha at the time, while he was still alive, where the Dhamma was there fully. Devadatta was there, though. From the very moment that the Buddha started speaking, teaching the Dhamma, because it's something that is conditioned, it starts to dissipate, become corrupted. That's one of the reasons why the Buddha did not want to teach it in the first place. Because people will not understand. Not everybody's coming to the table with the right intentions to practice. So times have changed is completely false. Again, this is using it as an excuse to keep the peace, as it were, to not stand out, to be part of the community, which is a very human, but I think in some parts of the world more than others, big part of feeling like, okay, you're part of the crowd, so I shouldn't stand out. But it goes against the Dhamma, because you're choosing to lie. Not speaking the truth, it's not just about lying, by the way. Many people misunderstand. They say it's musavada is about not lying. Yes. Not speaking falsehood. Yes. But also saying what you feel like could get you some advantages. The Buddha other places says to speak with some intention of some type of a gain. In this case, by the same token, you can say not to say things because by keeping silent, you're going to get some things. Just like those people in the Oval Office in America, in Washington, when they see terrible things being decided, thousands upon thousands of people are going to die because people are just following their own desire and lust for blood and gain. And you know this, and you have a position, but you say, no. And then you're going to make excuses. It's the same thing. So that is definitely breaking sila. When you do not stand up and say to the chief, to the monk, Bhante, why were you wearing suit? Why did you disrobe? And why did you go and get that thing, that medal, that recognition from the king? And that, well, how many sets of suits do you have, Bhante? Wait a minute, I don't think monks are allowed to disrobe. Once you disrobe, that means you're going to go at the end of the line if you decide to ever come back. You lost your position as chief. Your vasas are gone. It's equal to having sex as a monk. You're gone. What are you doing, Bhante? But by me keeping my mouth shut, I did the same thing as that monk in the Oval Office. Same. I broke a sila. And the Dhamma's burden is far heavier, I have to assure you. Because you're in a position, maybe those 100 people, they don't have as much knowledge of the Dhamma as you do. But you have to always make sure that when you're speaking, it has to be true. It has to be based on the Dhamma. Okay? And you have to say it with the spirit of metta. Now, in certain positions, certain situations, the Buddha says, is the person ready to hear? Okay? And this is another reason that many people use. It's not a reason, it's an excuse. Whether the person is ready or not, whether Donald Trump is ready or not, people have to come out with a loudspeaker and tell him, hey, stop it, you are wrong. Otherwise, these individuals will think that, oh, it's okay for me to take off my robes, put on a nice suit as a monk, and go and receive that medal from the king, that envelope, that thing. So otherwise, that's how we are contributing to the demise of the Dhamma. So that's my answer to those two. I hope it helps. And if it doesn't address, you can ask me more. There's another question here, though. Bhante, you mentioned, I wish I would have said something against corrupt people situations. Is the saying necessary, or is walking away, boycotting enough? No, it's not enough. They'll just say, oh, nobody said anything. You might know that you walked away. By the way, the question was from Patanjali. I didn't say it, mention it. But this is another way of escaping, standing out. Remember, many of us have the fear of standing out. Okay, this is with every, like, fear of speaking in public or public speaking. Many people have that fear, and they've even done tests, and they saw that in many cases it registers as if you're about to be killed or something if you're going to stand in front of people to speak. Some people have that much fear from speaking out. What if it's actually about the Dhamma, something that is that will be seen, or in this case affect your family, especially as I mentioned earlier to Hattaka about, well, what if your family has been supportive of that community? You have a name. So it's the face, I want to save face by, okay, it's safer for me. It's like those, in the 80s, I think they did an experiment in New York City at the height of crime. I think 70s or 80s, they did that. And they wanted to see whether it was true, this reputation that New Yorkers had fairly or unfairly received in the public, that they are careless, that they don't care. I'm not advocating saying that they were or are. But the test, forgot the name of the study, but they wanted to go ahead and do this experiment. They had actors where one person was pretending to be a boyfriend or a husband of this woman, and he pretended to hit. They were all actors. And so he was abusing and assaulting a female, a woman, while the cameras were rolling. They were actors, by the way. But the people, they wanted to see, what would people around them do? Would they interfere? Would they stop? Other examples were individuals who were being robbed, or individuals who, in the middle of the street, in daytime, or individuals who were being assaulted, like somebody who is pretending to punch a man against a wall, or ganging up on him, or somebody who had fallen pretending to have broken his knee. Very good actors that would convince anyone. But they were astounded by even I, as a viewer, I was, I think, in my teens when I saw it. I couldn't believe my eyes that a human being could see this happen and walk away. This is equivalent to that. Wanting to boycott. It's not enough. Of course, if you have no means of physically being there, or sending a letter or sending something, and you stop, let's say, buying their product, of course that is an option. But when I said no, it's worse than that. I was referring to you being in the position of power, just like those individuals are in, let's say, I'm giving the example of the Oval Office in the White House, where you could say, or at least not lie, not stay silent, though. Remember, there's a purpose for being silent, remaining silent. The Buddha had something to say about that. He said there's different kinds of remaining silent. when you know the person in front of you is just unreceptive to whatever you're going to share. It's pointless. So you don't answer them, you remain silent. Other times, the question that is asked cannot be answered by words. So you remain silent. But to remain silent, to give yourself some comfort, to ease the tension, or as I was saying to Hattaka about the pressure being lessened, that is copping out. That is cowardly. That is walking away from a position where you could have made a difference, even if they kicked you out from the Oval Office. And this is something that we're seeing not happen in today's world. People, I remember one time I saw a video of Dalai Lama was giving a Dhamma talk or a big shindig, big crowd of people. And the monks, Tibetan monks, were sitting to listen to their teacher respectfully. But even closer to the Dalai Lama, in a respectful position, was sitting one of his very famous students, Richard Gere, ahead of the monks. I was still a layman, by the way. I was not a Tibetan Buddhist or any of those. Anyhow, and I was like, that rubbed me the wrong way, as they say. This is wrong, I said. Why? What is this layman doing here in a higher, superior, more esteemed position than the monks? None of the monks came forward and said, excuse me, Lama, what's going on? Nobody. This is wrong. So it's happening all the time. If you see a person being perpetrated, assaulted on the street, do you yourself say, well, I'm going to walk away and just, I'm hurt by what you're doing? Or do you interfere? So that also says that we have become weaker, less courageous, in fact, even bordering on cowardice. But we have to justify it. That's the dangerous part that I'm seeing. We're justifying it by certain noble phrasing. It could be, oh, it's bad karma. Oh, oh, what are you going to do? It's the times. I can't do anything about it. No, it's always the time. It's not a different time. It happened even at the time of the Buddha. It could be happening to me. Aha! What if it's your family that's going to be bombed and killed? Would you remain quiet? That usually hits home, doesn't it? It no longer matters who it is. It's my family. I have to speak up. I have to stop you. So sometimes it's okay to just boycott, but other times, well, you have to be loud, or at least tell the person, at least tell them, excuse me, I don't agree with what you're doing, in clear, undeniably, black and white, completely categorical way, undeniably, unmistakable way. Because in this strategic communication that we've developed, which is anything but, it's completely false, it completely is lying, deceptive. We are deceiving ourselves. So we have to say it. Whether the person does anything with it, it's beside the point. At least you will go home knowing that you've done something, instead of going and burying your, I wish I did that, and bury it in the cemetery alongside you without having achieved it. That's why dreams that are not achieved make the cemetery the wealthiest place on real estate. So I hope that answers that question. If there are questions, comments, or this doesn't sound satisfactory.
Bhante?
Yes.
Again, I think this is a context question, but there are circumstances where you speaking out has very dire consequences for, and is life-threatening for others around you. So what are your thoughts on that? When it's affecting others in a very bad way. Your speaking out will negatively affect others.
Sometimes, of course, you said the word context. Context matters. That's undeniable. But sometimes our estimation of the negative possibilities is far worse than the actual possibilities that could happen. So it then becomes a matter of our fear. If I were to say this is another, excuse me. Yes, it might be for some people, well, come on, Bhante, there's got to be a context. Sometimes you have to consider. Yeah, that's a possibility, but I'm saying it's a very faint possibility compared to looking at, well, the fear that's underneath it, which is very similar. It's in line with that fear that said, what Hataka was saying about, some people say, well, times have changed, or especially, I'm going to bring myself bad karma. So this would be another version of that. If I say this, it's going to bring harm, destruction to others. Well, how do you know that that's a possibility, big possibility? Anything could happen, but are you sure that will happen? Second, what makes you sure that that's not happening already with you not having said a word? That's another possibility. And third, have you spoken to those people that you're worried about enough so that you're not saying anything? So do you see why I'm saying this is another derivation, another branching of that same fear? Oh, if I do this, then I'm bringing bad karma. Or, meanwhile, it's all coming from a very primal fear. I don't want to be exiled from the cave because our ancestors used to live in the refuge of a cave, and they would block the doorway from any lions or saber-tooth or bears or anybody coming attacking them at night. And anybody who was giving a problem or trouble, guess what? They would be thrown out. And that was equal to death. That is still in us. Part of the brain still functions like that. It's afraid. This is where we need to use the PFC, prefrontal cortex, our executive thinking capacity. That's what the Dhamma does. It provides us the tool to challenge that false fear, saying, it's not the end of the world. In fact, I'm going to sleep so much better. Now, of course, this has many, it's part of a spectrum, I would say, because sometimes what people will do is they're going to go to the opposite extreme of this and say, it's better for me to just be argumentative. Just point out the wrong things about this and that. That's not healthy either, because that's another way of seeking gain, recognition, and fame and renown, praise. That's wrong as well. The Buddha was not teaching people go and disrupt the pattern of society. No. Bring it to the Dhamma. How do you like to be treated? As I said, what if there is the decision that's being made and you're privy to that decision being made? You're present to it. And the decision being made involves annihilating people where some of your loved ones are there, or your own village. Would you remain quiet? At that moment, you're not going to think twice. These people you care about. But remember, all of this is on this mundane level of conditionality of life, which is always transitory, it's changing. So are you using this life, using the tools that Dhamma provides, to secure yourself the most that this life could provide you in understanding and advancing your thinking, breaking these bonds of fear, of not being truthful, not living with virtue. To break those bonds, you need this body, you need this world. Not for the sake of keeping this body, though. That's the problem here, which I'm trying to highlight. We are trying to hold on to reputation, status, body, life, health, you name it, for the sake of holding on to it. This is called Panchupadana Kanda. This is the grabbing onto these 5 bundles that make up a person, thinking that there's a fixed person here. There isn't. It's just a series of conditionalities upon conditionalities taking place. But we identify with these emotions and see them as reality, while we're sacrificing what's the next phase for us. To negotiate this, while you understand the value of this life, the rarity of this life, and not to be dissuaded or misled, because there's so many different things, so many layers to it, as you can tell, involved. To break free from this life is really bliss. That's why Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Ananda said, Bhava Nirodho Nibbana, to be done with existence. So as long as I'm holding on to inauthentic life, and being silent when I need to be loud is part of that, calling out when I need to call out, myself at least, why am I not saying that? I once was in a hall, in an auditorium, with a very, very famous Buddhist monk. I was still a layman then. If I say his name, everybody will know. Known in all, a Western monk, Theravada in Thai forest, giving the talk on the jhanas, actually he was talking about vipassana, I think. And this was in those days when they were still split. This clear separation was being advocated still between samatha and vipassana. Serenity practice, calming the mind, that's samatha, the jhanas basically, and vipassana. And I got up. There were people in the audience. I knew I was going to be rubbing the wrong way, as they say, because this person was their teacher. They loved him to death. He was like perfection. He was the embodiment of the Buddha for them. And I respected the teacher too, because of their writing, this and but I had my issues with these things, because I was shaking my voice and all that. I finally got up. I said, "Excuse me, Ajahn." He says, "Yes." I took the mic and I said, with my voice still vibrating, shaking from fear, because I'm exposing myself. I'm exposing my thinking to all these people. What if what comes out is blah, blah, blah? I've embarrassed myself in this whole university. I said, where do we find that separation where the Buddha says, drop the jhanas, just focus on the vipassana? I said, with all these years that I've been reading, researching, I have not found one, Bhante. Could you help me? He stopped talking for a while. He was quiet. And after some thinking, and the whole room was quiet, and he said, you're right. There isn't that inferiority or superiority, because they're both. Because I had said to him, I thought that they're the two wings of the single bird. Without them, the bird cannot fly. And he says, you're right. And even like 15 minutes after that, the talk was over, I went down to get my car. One of the individuals ran after me, trying to correct the teacher, because he had said certain things that were opposite of that. But apparently I didn't know this, but I had called him out. Because I asked him, I challenged him, where does it say in the suttas where the Buddha put one thing over the other in importance? Now, my heart was still beating when that person came to the parking lot 15 minutes later. I was, in a sense, terrified because I had really exposed myself. But I knew I had to say it. Now, in this case, this is so benign, right? But it had to do with a critical, very important point in the Dhamma, for me at least, at the time. And I was so comfortable that I did say something. Because there was also that fear in me that I don't want to lose respect towards this Ajahn. There was the other fear. Because I respected him. And I didn't want him to stand out or appear to be stupid. Or ill-informed, to say the least. So here's the student of his running back to me downstairs to the parking lot saying, oh, he was trying to say this, so making excuses for the teacher. So I said, well, that's fine. I respect. And I walked away. But I knew one thing, above all, I respected my courage to stand out. Now, again, this is a benign situation compared to what's happening in the world or what is happening in the temples that I was referring to. But I don't want to beat it up too much, this topic. But I hope I'm able to answer. Kisa Gotami, was that addressing your question? Okay. Okay, I'm glad. Any other? Okay, so let us transfer some merits. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu sasana. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desana. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu paranti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May the blessings of the Triple Gem be with you, with your loved ones. May you have happiness in your hearts, health in your bodies and minds. May your loved ones be safe, happy and healthy. May you be protected, prosperous. May your heart always circle back to the Dhamma. Through practicing of sati, through practicing your sila with sati, your virtue, keeping it intact, and every one of you will bring back purity to this world that is on a precipice. The purity of your practice in thought, in speech, and in body, throughout all your behaviors, helps to maintain purity in this world, to make it worthwhile for the four great divine kings to maintain their protection of this beautiful planet of ours, as long as we're alive, to protect the sasana for many years to come. Until next time, Sukhi Bhava.